There are several factors that ultimately work against Black Myth Wukong, all of which I'll detail in this review. However, none of them actually take away from the addictive spectacle of this experience. It's a journey through many unknowns that compile onto the player until you ask, how did I get here? A question I continue to ask myself while playing, yet there I was at 2 a.m., taking mental notes about the direction of this game, only for it to pull the rug under my feet to reveal a more ridiculous hand, fitting of the source material's comedic roots. Ultimately, for better or for worse, Black Myth Wukong is a game that follows the old saying of throwing everything at a wall and seeing what sticks. Luckily for developer game science, a few of these systems do, but the demands of player time and understanding lead to the exhausting exhibition of tales closer to the Odyssey rather than Journey to the West. Black Myth Wukong has players assume the role of the Destined One, who shares the appearance of Sun Wukong, a powerful monkey currently stuck in stone. The opening depicts a mighty battle which follows the Monkey King's imprisonment in the stone and the years that pass as followers await the revival. As a hopeful, you train and take on various missions to gather the objects needed to revive the king, and that's where the story kind of evaporates. Sure, you'll encounter other characters and things do happen, but nothing will ever actually make sense. Characters and systems are introduced only to be forgotten moments later, leaving the impression that the developers all worked in separate groups and then slowly brought the project together. The game's pacing is never in question because you're always in action or going somewhere. Time isn't wasted on exposition or adequately preparing you for what's happening on screen. It just plays out and demands you keep up. Now, the required lore can be found in text entries in the menu that weren't completely translated when I was able to access them. These do outline encountered characters and enemies and give you a better understanding of who and what they are. Outside of that text though, good luck. I was amazed by the speed at which the game would introduce characters only to have you fight them within seconds and then you never see them again. Characters like Tiger Vanguard, who makes the best introduction later, only to be defeated and never come up again. In any typical game, this character would easily be one of the main villains, but here, he's just a set piece. And the villains get even more incredible. I stopped wanting substance and found myself eagerly just searching for my next foe. This game makes you hungry for the thrill of whatever it's about to throw at you, and going in unprepared only adds frustration to the experience. This is where the player experience will be divided. In the same breath of games like Stellar Blade, Black Myth seems to only care about pushing action systems to their limit while shoving gorgeous set pieces and well-designed boss encounters into your face, and hope you don't care too much about why you're doing it all. There's a narrative there for those who want it, but you'll have to read the menus to fill in the gaps because this game is a bullet train and there's only time to stop for fights, which there are many. Boss battles happen often out of nowhere. Sometimes you have to randomly fight multiple bosses back to back for no apparent reason. Thankfully, there's a gracious checkpoint system that puts you close to the beginning of a fight, but in the event of multiple phase battles, you do get to start from the form that you died on to save time. Grunt encounters also take up a bulk of your time playing, but they are taken down pretty easily most of the time and are only really a threat when they're in groups. The Souls-like systems are pretty forgiving in this game, which has me almost just referring to it as a challenging action game, but I rarely felt like I couldn't get through a fight. Each of the 7 in-game areas are huge, with branching paths that allow you to head out in different directions and just see what happens. There's little to no direction, but you quickly get used to being lost. There was a time in the game where I was knocked out, captured, imprisoned, and woke up. A scene showed my character just pulling out his staff, which they left with him behind bars, and I broke out to another weird alarm system that never came back ever again and was never explained when it happened. Anyway, you get the point. This game is a journey that wants you to feel like you're on a real adventure, and I do think it accomplishes that. So let's talk about the action systems. Players are equipped with a staff, which becomes more powerful as you gain levels. Taking down enemies gives you experience and will used to buy and upgrade equipment. But I might be getting a little ahead of myself. In the opening hours, combat is very straightforward. And then you start unlocking new abilities and skills, each with a skill tree that can be used to refine your combat capabilities. I found myself filling out the skill trees for the defensive abilities like Paralyze to make combat a little more accessible, but there's a lot to parse through when considering how you want to build out your character. Further, you can reset these skills at a shrine whenever you want, which we'll discuss more later. Combat is exhilarating and probably the best part of the entire experience. In action, you can't help but be hypnotized by the on-screen acrobatics and skill-based combat. Players can cycle through stances that change light and heavy attack patterns. As you land attacks, you'll increase a gauge that allows you to unleash a powerful heavy attack. You can also equip spirits that can be individually upgraded for greater effect. Perfect dodging slows down time and adds iframes, but I will say that if you're looking for relentless Sekiro Shadows Die Twice meets Elden Ring levels of challenge here, well, you should probably lower those expectations. This game wants you to complete it eventually, and deaths only send you back to the most recent shrine, but you will keep your experience and will. The consequence of dying is mainly found in time wasted. Some enemies and navigating stages tax the player as they run headfirst into a fight, which they probably just died 10 times on already. Luckily, you can travel to other areas, grow stronger, and then return. I'd also say that there's enough side content happening alongside the main campaign to allow you to gain some levels. My only wish is that there is a proper aerial combo because the weird jump kick isn't fun, ever. There's an enormous pool of enemies that you'll encounter aside from the boss battles that constantly push your understanding of combat and reading enemy telegraphs to get through. I will say that the lock-on option is a little wonky and some enemy placements can come off as lazy, as areas seem to have just copied and pasted layouts, dampening the experience. An example of lousy enemy placement is an area where you have to climb out of prison and get to a part where you have to balance on some wood, but there's 3 enemies that are strangely placed there that when automatically locked on, your character will just attack them and fall to their death. Situations like this feel very disjointed from the other areas, but they are rare. One of the most significant downsides of the entire experience is the lack of a map. These areas are enormous, and while you get accustomed to their layout after multiple visits, a map would have greatly helped. Fast travel is also hurt by this, with shrines allowing you to visit earlier areas, but there's no indication about where the points are in the level. Shrines are also where you craft new items, weapons, and equipment, which all eventually get unlocked linearly. While it's possible to find some rare equipment in chests around the map, most of the strongest equipment unlocks during event milestones. Equipment has some unique buffs and stat increases, but I got through the game without much thinking by equipping the newest items as they were available. Black Myth Wukong is gorgeous graphically. Each environment has distinct areas to explore, but cave dungeons are overused a little too much. An argument could be made that the team played it safe regarding locales, but they do some unique things here, such as environmental puzzles that change the landscape, or mid-bosses that keep you from realizing you've been in a forest area for the last 10 hours. Black Myth Wukong is a spectacle from beginning to end. Those who wish to immerse themselves fully into the world will be treated with a large serving of Chinese lore, and those who don't can enjoy a challenging action game. Ultimately, I believe Black Myth Wukong put all of its resources into the combat system, and that pays off by keeping the player invested in taking down the many enemies within this adventure. The result of all this can appear a little disjointed at times, only focusing on a specific group of players. With that said, I applaud Game Science for creating an adventure that feels like an adventure. 30 hours into the game, I was reading through some in-game journals as if I was reminiscing on quests that took place 20 years ago, and I was strangely overcome with nostalgia. I don't know if a game like this can ever be replicated in the same way and still deliver this amount of charm, but for what it is, Black Myth Wukong is an enjoyable video game. Noisy Pixel is giving Black Myth Wukong an 8 out of 10. Thanks for watching. This video is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon. Noisy Pixel is run by a group of gamers providing independent gaming coverage through news, reviews, previews, and more. Check out our Patreon to help support our continued growth, and subscribe to keep up with all our future content.
Noisy Pixel.